All right, good day. This is Dr. Knotts. I hope these lectures are helping you to understand suggestibility as well as temperament and the creation of, or what would you say, the establishment of the way the person will think for the rest of their life. In the last lecture, we covered how in vitro, or prior to conception even, the stage is set for the way the child will become suggestible. Today, I want to talk about suggestibility in the post-delivery or after the child's delivered. Suggestibility, the primary influence of suggestibility or the acclimation of it will be after the child is delivered, because now their eyes can acclimate to what they've heard and what they've felt. It's the tying together of what we call the lesser sensory. The eyes are actually the lesser sensory. The epidermis, the auditory, are the primary. The eyes come afterwards. And what most people don't understand is that it's by tying in the eyes that the inference is made. Temperament begins being built. The temperament begins being founded after delivery. And that's because the child now is putting visual reference to what it's felt, to what it's heard, to the emotions of the mother and the climate and, shall we say, the environment, the nature in which it was established. So, the child will learn its temperament through suggestibility after birth. So, let's get into this just a little bit. If you have a parent, and I'm talking about the dominant parent in the home, the major caregiver, which most people believe is the father, but actually it's the mother. It's the one that the child is held the most by. It's the one that the child is touched by the most. And primarily in most homes, the mother is the one that feeds the infant. They change the infant. They take care of it. Now, if it's the father, then it'll be the father. But whoever has the majority of contact with the child will be the dominant caregiver, or the primary. So to the age of 5, the suggestibility between the delivery and the age of 5 will determine the temperament, and the foundation for the temperament will be established. Now, here's what we do. We have to look at it and understand that much of perception, suggestibility, is on unconscious communications. Unconscious communications are those things that we're not conscious of. And it may sound interesting, but verbal content is one of those things. Most people are unconscious about the verbal content. They just simply spew things out. But it's the brain that will select and listen and modify to the things that it hears, and it will determine how it will receive that verbal content. The next would be extraverbal content, or the non-spoken aspects of communication. This is body language. This is environment. I mean, somebody can say something to you approaching you in your car in a garage that they may say to you at the workplace, and you can take it in a fearful way in the garage because there's no one around and you're not expecting it, whereas in the work environment, you would expect it. So the environment in which you're in will dictate how you receive and process that information. The third is the state of mind of the individual. And this is important when we begin talking about the intellectual and the somnambulist. Atmosphere has an incredible amount of influence on creating a somnambulist, and that's one of the 4 types of perception, and on creating the temperament of the individual. In the temperament, we have the physical, we have the emotional, we have the somnambulist, somnambulist, and the intellectual. Now, here's how it happens. A physical person will take things literally. They will take things literally, and the reason is because this is what happened in their home. The mother would say something to the child or the father, and then they would enforce it. They would say, Johnny, eat this food. child eats the food. If the mother is a physical, she will do it in a way that it's inferring. Here's the incredible thing. A physical person will speak through inference. An emotional will speak through direct, literal. So a emotional suggestible will speak to their child like this: Johnny, you should eat your food. Okay? Actually, that's a way a physical will. Johnny, you should eat your food. They're implying that you should. They're inferring. Whereas an emotional will do this: say, Johnny, eat your food. The reason is the emotional tries not to attach any emotion to it. They protect their emotions and they won't put them out. So they speak directly, they speak literally. On the other hand, the physical will not want to attach anything physical to it, so they will infer. They will say, you should eat your food. Do you want to eat your food? Doesn't this food look good to eat? So the physical person will infer things. And the reason is they protect the physical. They do not want to associate the physical body with anything, so they use an inference, which is an emotional. They put their emotions out in front. So here's how it works. The primary caregiver, if they say something and then follow through with it, in other words, they say, go clean your room or I will have to punish you. And if the child just goes in the room and sits and plays and doesn't do it, and the parent comes in and then punishes them, then they have been spoken to in a physical, literal way. And what will happen is the child will learn direct, literal communication. In other words, its suggestibility will become direct and literal. That is what makes it physical. Now, if the person does not follow through with what they say, it will be what's called incongruentness. It will have no congruity. I'm sorry that I'm slurring my speech. I haven't felt good. And what happens is, because it's incongruous, or it doesn't have what we'd call congruent harmony, the child will look for a hidden meaning. You see, if they say, go clean your room or you'll be punished, but then you come in there and the room's not cleaned and they're playing, and you'll say, well, didn't I tell you to clean the room or I'd have to punish you? Now you need to get to work cleaning your room. That's the last time I'm talking to you. But then you never follow through with it. Then the child will say, you know what, their mind won't be able to understand it. The brain is like a computer in the formative stages, and you're literally programming, especially within the first 2 years. And that means how you communicate to others around you. For instance, if the wife says to the husband, you know, I'm tired of you coming home late. Next time you do that, I won't be here. And you think, well, the child's only 2, it won't interpret it. The brain of the child is actually taking in everything you say. But then the husband continues to come home late, and the wife continues to say that. The child will say, you know what? There's a hidden meaning here. She doesn't really mean it physically like she's saying. So what happens is it will look for a hidden meaning, and it will attach emotions to what is being said. This is what will create the temperament. Now, this is what's important to understand. The way a physically suggestible person takes their input messages, or what we call the perceptual units, this perceptual info, is one, when they get the perception or the communication, they first take it as a literal thought. A physical person takes it as a literal thought. Like, if you don't, or I want you to get the tires changed on the car because we're going on a trip and they'll blow out if we don't. So the first thing they'll do is they'll take that literal, and then they'll see an image in their mind of those tires being worn out. And then they'll attach a physical feeling to it. And the physical feeling will be not a fear of it blowing out or anything like that. That's emotional. But the physical feeling they'll attach to it is the responsibility aspect of needing to do it. The guilt of not responding. And they'll then translate that physical feeling into an emotional response, i.e. the guilt following the responsibility. So here's how it is. I want to try to make this clear. The way that a physical suggestible takes the input, one, it is a literal thought. They take it literally, and it becomes a literal thought. Then it becomes a literal image. They see it in their mind, or their mind does. It turns it into a picture, and that's how it'll store it in the modeling center. Then it will create a physical feeling for that image. It will make a physical feeling, and it'll attach it to that image. Then it will create an emotional response, because remember, the physical responds in inference or emotionally. Now, the exact opposite happens with an emotional. The emotional will first take in the thought, but not literally. They'll look for a hidden meaning. And then they will create, most likely, several images to go with it, to give them a variety of instances. And they will attach emotions to each one of the different images. It could be good, it could be bad, it could be scary, it could be happy. Then they'll attach feelings to those images, and then a physical reaction to whatever the feeling is. Now, it's important to understand that the unknown is pain. The known is pleasure to the developing brain and for the rest of the life. So, even if it's a negative thing, the brain will choose it instead of not knowing what the outcome is. An undetermined outcome is scary and painful to the brain. It wants to know what's going to happen to make its decisions. It's called empirical thinking matters. Within empirical thinking matters, it takes the units and it has a proper response for each and every one. A somnambulist, I'm having trouble with my speech today. I've been having heart problems all week, is somebody that comes from a home that is very confusing. You can have one who says something and never follows through, like a mother who will argue and fuss and fight and never back up their words. Johnny, I've told you if you don't do that, I'm going to spank you. This is the last time I'm going to tell you. Then they tell them again. But you have a father who says, wait a minute, today's Tuesday. You're supposed to take the trash out. I told you to take the trash out, so I'm going to have to spank you now. Or you're not going to need an allowance this week. They'll have a father maybe that's a physical, or a mother that's a physical, a father that's the opposite, a mother that's the opposite. So they're getting mixed communications. But it's a little bit more than that. A somnambulist will respond to either. That's because they've been trained to respond to either. And they usually have a lot of repressed anxiety. Unknowns, in other words, not knowing how somebody will respond, will create anxiety. It will also activate and repress the coping mechanism and the ability to fight or resist. Because a child is unable to resist against a parent. And when it doesn't know what the outcome is, that's the most painful thing it can have. So what happens is when you have a physical and an emotional raising a child, in other words, they're not agreed and they don't stick to their guns together, because they should both be doing it physically and literally, it'll create a somnambulist child. But there's an apex point where if there's a certain amount of unexpectancy, hidden meanings, anxieties that will be repressed, it will create what's called the intellectual, which will become more caloric and phlegmatic. A phlegmatic, caloric intellectual is somebody that's extremely introverted. The more anxiety that's given, the more sociopathologies you will have within the mind. You do not want sociopathologies in your child. You do not want psychopathologies in your child. These are irrational thinking and behavioral matters. So why are we going through this? We're going through this because you're either studying psychology under me or you're going through marriage counseling. I don't know which one you are, but in marriage counseling, you need to learn how to found the home in a godly way. And a godly way is the proper way to create a better mind for your child. And it is this. Speak what you have to speak in love, not through anxieties, not through fear, not through anger or emotion. Follow through. If you have a reward, like, Susie, you get a B or more, I'll give you $5 for every B or $6 for every A, follow through. If you have a punishment system, follow through. Make sure it's biblical, it's not excessive or anything like that. You should never beat or abuse anybody, a spouse or a child. You need to do everything in love. You need to create a home where they know that you mean what you say and that their emotions are not hidden or protected. They need to be in a calm, peaceful way. Adults don't argue, they don't fuss, they don't fight. They speak logically and rationally to each other because they love each other. On television, everybody's high-strung and ready to fly off the handle and voice and state their opinion and fight for what they believe in. That's what creates a psychopath. That's not a God home. It's not a God-blessed home. And it's not a home that you really want to be in, or especially you do not want to raise children in. So how do we do this? We learn to communicate to one another. If you are a physical, you will infer things. You will speak to your spouse in a way where instead of directly saying it, you'll say, hey, don't you think this would be a better idea? Or should we do this? Or what do you think about this? So try to learn to say things in a loving way, because the emotional person will take things personally. Remember, they always add an image, several of them, to whatever the thought is. They always have more than one, and they'll attach an emotional feeling to each one of the different ones. Depending on the home that they were raised in, they might always attach something negative to it rather than positive. And then they'll attach a physical reaction to it. So they'll get angry or stew for several days, or they'll be happy, or they'll hug you. You see, how you speak to them will determine how they respond to you. If you're an emotional, you'll be speaking directly and literally. And that's why an emotional and a physical are kind of like the perfect husband and wife team. Because the one will be speaking directly to the emotion, to the physical, and the physical will be speaking in inferences to the emotional. It's like a match made in heaven. So this is Dr. Knotts. I hope this has helped you in learning a little bit more about marriage, about psychology, and understanding people and how their temperaments are created. The 4 lectures on temperament are supposed to precede this. So Lord bless you in your endeavors to serve Him.